certainly is part of the soul of the church. I can feel it now, and you can see it on the faces here. The time we spent searching and investigating was worthwhile. I thought I had a big responsibility when the pastor asked me to head the committee to buy this organ. After all, I'm a businessman, not a musician. But I was certainly lucky with the committee I got. Our church organist, Alice Berry, was on the committee, and the third member was Fred Thompson. He's a real leader in our church, Sunday school superintendent and choir director, and head of all our youth activities. We got right down to business the first night we met at my house. So, of course, I'm delighted to have your help. It's an important decision we have to make. We all know the church needs a new organ, but the question is, what kind and what make should we recommend? I'm sure we all have some specific requirements in mind. So let's talk about them. What are your ideas, Mrs. Berry?
Well, my first consideration, of course, is how the organ will sound in our church. That means we want an organ that will be acceptable in every way for use in church.
How do you mean that, Mrs. Berry?
Well, church music should inspire a congregation. It should be rich, full of meaning. It should be capable of interpreting the meaning of our hymns. It should be a church organ.
I see.
So do I, Jim. But I think Mrs. Berry will agree that a church organ must be useful in other ways, too.
What do you mean by that, Fred?
Well, just this. In addition to the music for the regular church services, I'd like to see us get an organ that the young people will use, too, in their activities.
Sunday school?
Yes, Sunday school, all the young people's programs, which are very important.
You've got a very good point there, Fred. Now, let me tell you some of the things I'm thinking about. First, I look at this as an investment. Just as in business, I want to be certain that we get the very best value and the very best quality. And I want to be sure that we won't be burdened with heavy maintenance and service costs, month after month, for years to come.
That's right, Jim. Those are important points.
Yes, they are, Fred. And I want to be 100% certain that I'm dealing with a manufacturer with a fine reputation, one whose experience is outstanding. Those are the points I'm going to check into.
You know more about those things than I do. What I really want is an organ that's right for church, our church.
I'm looking for versatility, an organ that many people, old and young, can enjoy.
And I'll play the hard-hearted businessman to be sure that the organ you both want will be the best possible investment for the church. After that meeting, all three of us worked independently, each of us trying to find the one organ that would satisfy our particular requirements best. When we had made up our minds independently, we met again at my house to report and make our separate recommendations. Well, Ms. Berry, let's hear your report first. What organ do you recommend?
Goodness, me first? All right. I'm convinced that I found an organ that will meet all my wishes for an instrument that will sound right, be right for the music in our church. I recommend that we buy a Hammond organ.
Well, that's great, Mrs. Berry, because Hammond is my choice, too.
How about you, Mr.
Yes,
Graham?
how about you?
Well, now this is interesting, because the Hammond organ gets my recommendation, too. There's no disagreement.
Good.
But now, let's not get carried away. I think we owe it to the congregation to check the reasons behind our unanimous decision. You first, Mrs. Berry.
Well, my recommendation is based on my experience as a musician. I thought my first step would be to find what other churches are using and how satisfied they are.
And you found?
That over 35,000 churches of all sizes and denominations have installed Hammond organs.
35,000? That is important. What else?
Well, I called on the best organists in town and for quite a few miles around. And, well, I got my most valuable information from Alan Temple.
You mean the organist at the Parkside Church?
Yes. I plucked up my nerve and went to see him.
Well, he's certainly the best organist in this part of the country. What did he tell you?
He was most helpful.
course, I'll be glad to tell you why we chose a Hammond for this church.
Thank you, Mr. Temple. I hate to take up your time, but our committee has a big responsibility to the congregation.
Yes, I know. And as organists, we have an important responsibility to the tradition of church music, too. Our music must convey the same universal message of love and hope and redemption that the words of our hymns and prayers do. That's why this organ is so rewarding.
Of course, I know your reputation as an organist, Mr. Temple.
Thank you, Mrs. Berry. But of course, you know I'm only one musician. Many world-famous organists, composers, and conductors play and praise the Hammond. Fine symphony orchestras use it. And of course, anyone with an ear for a beautiful, rich tone appreciates the Hammond, too.
There's just one question, though.
Oh, what's that?
Well, do you think I'll be able to...
Able to handle the Hammond? Step around here and I'll show you. Now, as you know, church music calls for traditional organ tones. Here I have 18 preset keys. Each one of them gives me one of those traditional tones. Listen. That's a familiar tone, isn't it? Here's another. Here's another.
Seems quite simple.
It's simplicity itself. Listen again. A full organ tone. Now, those are only 4 of the familiar traditional tones your congregation will want. Altogether, you have 18 tones available simply by pressing one of these presets. Actually, they'll give you all the basic organ tones you'll need for most of your liturgical music. But to an organist, the most valuable feature of a Hammond organ is its unique system of drawbar registration. With just these few drawbars, it's possible to create quickly and easily thousands of beautiful, full, rich organ tones of your own choosing.
Really? How?
Simply by applying the fundamental principles of all music. As you know, tones are made up of harmonics, just as words are made up of letters. On a typewriter, we can make any word we want simply by combining the various letters of the alphabet. On the Hammond organ, we have 9 harmonic drawbars that constitute a musical alphabet. By arranging the drawbars in different positions, we actually spell tones with harmonics like you spell words with letters. We could very easily call this system a tone typewriter.
Is it hard to learn?
Not at all. Look, you know there are only 4 basic families of organ tones. Flutes, reeds, strings, and diapasons are foundation tones. Let's set the drawbars for a nice flute tone. There. And here's what it sounds like.
That's very much like the tone on these preset keys.
Right. That's a fundamental flute tone. But the remarkable part of the drawbar system is that I can get hundreds of variations of those 4 basic tones just by arranging the drawbars. Let's make our flute tone a little brighter by adding this drawbar. There.
Oh, I like that better.
How about this? Here's another flute tone.
That's beautiful. How many of those tones can you get? Different flute tones, I mean.
I've no idea. Thousands. You see, even the smallest adjustment of the drawbars changes the tone slightly. So I don't suppose I've ever used all the tones it's possible to get from this flexible system of drawbar registration.
It's amazing. With that system, I wouldn't be restricted to any one tone. I could adjust it to the music.
That's right.
But what about the other three basic families? Strings, for instance.
Here's a lovely string tone. And here's a reed tone with our flute accompanying. And finally, here's the most familiar of organ tones, a diapason.
It's amazing. Such wonderful tones. And so many. But how can I remember those settings?
Very simply. You see, each of the four has its own characteristic shape on the drawbars. Well, here, maybe this will illustrate it for you. You see, there's the basic setting for a flute tone. That's the way our drawbars were set here. And there's the basic shape. And here's the basic setting for the string tones. All you have to remember is this slow curve. And here's the reed setting. Any variation of the reed tone you want will be in that same V shape. And here's the diapason, like a big check mark from left to right. And that's all there's to it.
Why, it's as simple as can be. I'm sure I can handle it.
Of course you can. And you'll find much satisfaction, too, in the fact that this is a complete organ. In fact, every model in the Hammond line is complete with 2 manual keyboards and a pedal keyboard. Listen. Now, this organ has a 32-note pedal keyboard designed to meet AGO specifications, and an additional solo pedal unit that will give you tones from a 1 foot all the way down to a 32-foot pitch. Now, listen to this.
That's beautiful. Of course, your church is so much larger than ours. Would a Hammond sound so grand in ours?
It certainly would. You know, I played a Hammond in our small church before this one was built. A Hammond organ is the only organ that can provide just exactly the right amount of reverberation, regardless of the acoustics or size of your church. That's because it doesn't depend on the natural reverberation of the room. The reverberation unit provided with the tone cabinet will give you cathedral-like tones in even the smallest church. Now, here's an exclusive feature of the Hammond organ. It's called touch response percussion control and produces percussive effects. For instance, here's a bell tone carrying the melody.
My, how beautiful.
And here's a duet with a chime-like tone.
had no idea you could get those tones without special attachments.
Well, this unique feature isn't found on any other organ. And that's another reason why I favor a Hammond. You can produce hundreds of interesting percussion tones ranging all the way from chimes to harps. Here's another.
Mr. Temple, it's simply thrilling.
It's a beautiful instrument. This concert model is the largest in the Hammond line. Now, I don't know what your church's budget is, but whatever it is, you'll find a Hammond organ that will give you the same registration flexibility and rich tonal quality that you hear now. Come, let me show you something. Now, here in the choir practice room, we have the spinet model of the Hammond organ. It has the same drawbar system as the larger organs. The new model spinet also has the percussion control I showed you. This model is perfect for this place. Why, for years we used it as the main instrument in our original church. And even now we move it over to the chapel for weddings and special services. Listen to it.
I was just entranced at the beautiful music coming out of the little spinet. And now, of course, I can't wait to... That is, of course, if you're satisfied.
What about you, Fred? Miss Berry seems to have run into a very convincing gentleman.
Well, I had about the same experience. Only there must have been 1,000 people convincing me. You know that big community church in North Hills?
Mm-hmm.
You've heard about the very active weekday program they have. Well, that church is really the center of community life. What I saw made my head swim. They have a big Hammond organ in the church, but they also have a spinet that is the busiest organ you can possibly imagine. 2 kids can lift it, and they wheel it back and forth all week from room to room. Wherever they need music, that's where the Hammond organ is. In the Sunday school room, it seemed to make those children sing with all their hearts, and from Sunday morning on, all through the week. That Hammond spinet model followed the activities all through the church calendar. The adult Sunday school, the Boy Scouts, the Glee Club, the Teenage Club, prayer meeting, and choir practice. I was amazed. Why, they carted that spinet from place to place like it was no more trouble than a piccolo.
Well, isn't that hard on an organ?
Not on a Hammond, it isn't. The activities director there told me he had thrown away the key to the organ. So many people, young and old, are able to play it, and do.
Well, doesn't it get out of tune?
No, I asked the same question. It's the only instrument in the world that can't get out of tune. Well, that's one of the features that made the Hammond organ famous.
That's right. Mr. Temple told me the same thing.
By golly, that's why the people I called told me there had never been a penny of tuning expense and almost no maintenance cost with their Hammond organs. You know, I practically dialed my finger off calling every church in the city to get answers to my questions. Now, may I interrupt you 2 enthusiasts long enough to tell you why I recommend the Hammond?
Of course.
Surely.
Well, they provided straightforward answers to many of my questions, and you've confirmed everything I've read. Then it was a simple matter to check Hammond's standing and reputation. It's the best. I learned that there was an organ priced to meet our budget. And, of course, I've already told you that I'm satisfied we'll have no tuning costs and little maintenance to worry us in the future. I've checked everything from a business standpoint, and I'm convinced that a Hammond organ will be our best investment. Yes, Mrs. Berry, and Fred, I'm in complete accord with you. I feel confident that we've reached a sound decision.
Oh, Mr. Graham, our congregation has such a wonderful surprise in store. Why,
Everybody will enjoy it.
Yes, music for our church. Good music, inspiring music. I am proud that I had something to do with bringing this organ into our church. And I know Fred Thompson feels the same way. And well, as for Mrs. Berry, her music this morning is speaking for her.